Let's talk about infection. What is an infection? An infection is the colonization of a host by microbial species. So, infection occurs when microbes, bacteria, or viruses or parasites come and form a colony in your body, and these form a big colony in the body, and because of that, whatever the symptoms that happen, that is all called as an infection. Infective microbes seek to use the host resources to reproduce, often resulting in disease. Colloquially, infections are usually considered to be caused by microorganisms like viruses, prions, and bacteria, though larger organisms like macroparasites and fungi can also infect. So, what we are trying to say over here is an infection can be caused by bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, even there is a new category called as prions also. Okay, I had to, because we are talking about infection and because we should have some of our knowledge updated, I had to talk about Zika virus. Zika virus is one of the most discussed virus in our recent times. How is it spread? It is spread by Aedes aegypti, the same mosquito that causes the dengue infection, and the other one is A. albopictus. So these are the two mosquito bites which cause the Zika virus infection. The first case was reported in around 2008 in the US. And why is it bad? Because it has a very rapid rate of transmission. That is one of the disease, one of the cause. And the other thing is, it if the mother has it, it goes on into the neonates, and the neonates, it is very bad for them. So there are like bad complications like microcephaly, ocular disorders, eye problems, or even the mother can have miscarriage or an abortion because miscarriage because of the Zika virus infection. What are the complications that you see in adults because of the Zika virus infection? That is generally the development of Guillain-Barré syndrome. What is Guillain-Barré syndrome? It is actually a syndrome which affects the nervous system of the body, where the viruses affect the nerves, and because of that there is a kind of paralysis in the body, and it is generally in ascending, so it will begin with your toes and feet and legs and slowly moves upwards. It is bad because you have to control the infection before it reaches up to your respiratory muscles, otherwise you will start having the person will start having difficulty in breathing because of it, and the person um, may not be able to survive the paralysis of the respiratory muscles, right? Now, how can you prevent the spread of Zika virus? By limiting the travel. You do not go to the areas which are already declared affected by the Zika virus. The other thing you can do is, it is spread by mosquito, right? So use mosquito repellents, cover the exposed surfaces if you are going into those endemic areas. So that is all about the Zika virus, the Zika infection, which is so talked about. Okay, now coming back to our chapter about infection, about the microorganisms. These are general terms about humans and microorganisms, their relationships, and just the general terms. So, what is symbiosis? Symbiosis means when there is only human is getting the benefits and microorganism is there is no harm to the microorganism. So symbiosis is generally when you have those bacteria which are living in your gut. So those bacteria, they like lactobacilli, remember, so that helps in absorbing your vitamin B12. It helps in digesting the food, and it helps in breaking down the carbohydrates in the body. So that is a symbiotic relationship. Mutualism is when it benefits both human and the microorganism. Of course, word mutual, right? It's anything that is mutual means both the parties have agreed to it. So mutualism is like both microorganism is also getting benefits and the humans is also getting benefit. So that happens when in the cases when those bacteria that are in our mouth, they help in breaking down some food particles in the mouth, helping the humans, and they themselves also feed on it, on the nutrients. So it's a mutual relationship. Commensalism means benefits only the microorganisms and there is no harm to the human. So whenever those microorganisms which are living on the surface of our skin, they are commensal, so they are getting benefit because they have a place to live and they can live properly. But they are not doing any harm to us, right? Because they are on the skin surface. So those are commensals. Pathogenicity, when it benefits the microorganism but it harms the human. You know what the patho means, any abnormality, right? So pathogenicity is used when the microorganism is getting the benefits but the human beings are getting affected. So whenever there is any infection or any virus which is entered in our body, and like we have developed influenza or like symptoms of flu, that means it's a pathogenic virus, right? So that is pathogenicity. Opportunism is like a situation in which benign microorganisms become pathogenic because of decreased human host resistance. You should like, the link is opportunity. If you get an opportunity, you can do anything, right? So that is what is opportunism. The microorganisms got an opportunity to be overactive, to be able to fight, right? So that is opportunism. So when does that happen? When in conditions like HIV or malignancy. So what happens in HIV? Your immunity is down, so even those normal organisms which are living in our body, which are normal to our body, they will start producing signs and symptoms. Okay, they will start giving us complaints. That is all about the terms. Now coming to the process of infection. What are the process? What are the stages of infection? So first is an incubation period. It is from the initial exposure to the onset of first symptoms. So the first time that the microorganism enters the body, from that to the onset of the symptoms, like the milder version, it may last from some hours to some years depending. Okay, like they have included years because hepatitis B virus, HIV virus, they can stay in our body for a longer time and the symptoms will be produced at a much later time. Okay, so they have very long incubation periods. But some of them are shorter, like our influenza virus. It came, we ingested, like we got infected virus in our body today and we'll show the signs and symptoms tomorrow. Okay, that's incubation period. The prodromal stage is when you're having the symptoms, those mild symptoms, those discomfort and tiredness, and realizing something is going on. You have got some infection, throat irritation, something like that. Invasion period, pathogen is multiplying rapidly, symptoms specifically related to the pathogen or inflammatory responses happening. So when I said like invasion period, when the symptoms initially they were mild, but when they start becoming severe and you start realizing, okay, it is, I have an infection of the sinus, so it's a sinusitis, so you start getting congested sinuses and stuff like that. So that's the invasion period. My virus has gone into the sinus and it's multiplying rapidly, and because it's multiplying, the immune system is working against it. Because the immune system is working against it, the inflammatory response is coming. So that's all invasion period. Convalescence is the period when individuals' immune and inflammatory systems have successfully removed the infectious agents and the symptoms start declining. So when you enter the convalescence phase, it means that our body was able to fight against the infection and the microorganisms were killed and they were getting removed from the body and our body is healing. What are the factors that influence the capacity of a microorganism to cause a disease? So the factors on which a microorganism can cause a disease is, one of them is communicability. So the ability, how quickly it can spread from one person to the other person, right? So like measles, pertussis, they can spread very easily because they spread by droplets. Okay, but HIV spreads by a fluid contact and only like body fluids, so it has a lower communicability. Immunogenicity, the ability to induce an immune response. What is the ability that like a simple flu virus can elicit a very localized immune response, right? Whereas the HIV, it's like kind of systemic immune response. Infectivity, the ability to invade and multiply in the host. So infectivity is how bad, I mean how notorious the microorganism is. It can enter our body and it can invade it and it can also multiply and infect us. Mechanism of action is how the microorganism is damaging our tissue. Okay, that is how the mechanism of action. Pathogenicity, the ability to produce disease. So how can you say what is the pathogenicity? Like we have a lot of viruses, lot of bacteria, right? But what is the capacity that it can cause the signs and symptoms in a human being? That is the pathogenicity. How much its success depends on its communicability, its infectivity, its extent of how much tissue damage the microorganism can do, how virulent it is. So that is whole all the factors which are helping in determining if the microorganism is pathogenic or not. Okay. Portal of entry is the route by which the microorganism infects. So some of them are by air entry, some of them are by food, some of them is by sexual transmission, some of them is by insect bite. So those are the portal of entry. Toxigenicity is the ability to produce soluble toxins or endotoxins, factors that greatly influence the degree of virulence. So, what is toxigenicity? Some of the bacteria, some of the viruses, they can produce those toxins. Like we studied about the chemokines, the chemical mediators. Similarly, these bacteria, they can produce toxins. These toxins are very bad to our body. So, that is the toxigenicity of the bacteria. Virulence is the capacity to cause severe disease. For example, measles virus is of low virulence, whereas rabies is highly virulent. So what they're trying to say is the measles virus will give only a localized, it will only affect you locally, but a rabies virus is highly virulent, so it will cause a lot of signs and symptoms. Okay. Now, what are the types of infectious diseases? So, infectious diseases are classified by their prevalence and spread within the community. Okay, first type is endemic. The disease with a very high but constant rate of infection in a particular population is called as endemic. The good example is diabetes. Diabetes is an endemic disease. It has a higher rate and it's prevalent in the population. Epidemic is when there are new infections in a particular population and it greatly exceeds. So when can a infection be called a epidemic? When it is like it suddenly the number increases. Okay, so like for example, we had a counting that by month of January there are only 10 new cases of influenza virus or flu virus getting infected in the population of Toronto. But suddenly in February, instead of 10, they come to like around 100. So then suddenly it will be like a very drastic change, right? So then you know that there is an epidemic of a virus, that there is something going on with the flu virus. It is a sudden increase in the prevalence. There is a suddenly increase of flu virus everywhere. Pandemic and epidemic that spreads over a large area, such as a continent or worldwide. As I said, it's like it's present and it's all over the world. Okay, so HIV virus is said to be an example of a pandemic. It's present all over the world and in a larger area, in a continent in the worldwide, and it's at a very higher rate because number of people getting infected with HIV is increasing everywhere. It's a pandemic. Now, process of infection. So what are the routes? So here I have just tried to show you by the diagrams. You can either get the infection from the environment, you're drinking some water, infected water, going fishing, or going into the mountains, or if you have some pets, you can acquire some infections, some microbes from the pets, or if you eat some infected food like any infected meat or milk or vegetables not washed properly, you can get the infection. You can also get it from the zoonosis by animals like a snake bite or something like that, and also you can get it by your recreational activities. So what are those? Like if you go swimming, you get some infection, or while you are doing gardening, or while you are going out somewhere and some other person is infected and you get the virus from that person, so that can also cause infection. So those are the different processes of infection. Now coming to the classes, what is the big class of microorganisms? So we did there are bacteria, virus, fungi, protozoa, helminths and prions. Okay, now coming to the bacteria. Bacteria are of two types. Either they are round cocci or they are long cigar shaped bacilli. Now they can be either gram positive, that is when they are purple stained with the gram stain, or they can be gram negative, that is they are pink stained by the stain. Okay, that is basically they are purple stain when they have a particular layer in their cell wall. We don't have to go so much in detail, so I am not explaining it so much. Okay, but the gram positive cocci examples are staphylococcus, streptococcus and enterococcus. Gram-positive bacilli examples are, they can be spore forming or non-spore forming. Gram-negative bacilli are all those that affect your GI, enterics, your respiratory system, zoonotics, and gram-negative cocci. Those are the classifications of bacteria. Coming to the viruses, they can be DNA virus also, they can be RNA virus also. Now, what are the I know about, I think HIV is an RNA virus, and I think hepatitis B is a DNA virus. Okay, fungi can be cutaneous, systemic, and opportunistic. So those that only cause the infection of the skin, sorry, those are cutaneous fungi. Those that cause of infection of the whole system, they are systemic. And those that infect you when you have immunosuppressed condition like in HIV, those are called as opportunistic. Okay, so cryptococcus infection is an opportunity, and systemic is when you have aspergillosis, your whole respiratory system gets infected. And cutaneous is when you have your toenail infection, like it's also very common if you are in the from the hot areas and those very hot countries, then you get, because of heat and sweat and everything, you get those cutaneous fungi infections of the thumb. Okay, protozoa. Protozoas are all those Entamoeba histolytica which affect the GI system. They can affect also CNS system. They can form infections. They can also cause like malaria. They all come in the protozoa. Okay. Helminths. Helminths are all those worms. Roundworm, tapeworm. All those worms come into the helminths category. And prions are like, they are those proteins, they are like those lost electrons, lost souls, tiny. They are those proteins, and they can cause severe diseases, which, because they are tiny proteins, they can go anywhere in the body, and guess what, where they go to the brains. So they cause symptoms like seizures and convulsions and all those complicated symptoms. So what are the diseases which are caused by prions? Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or Kuru disease. Those are the common ones. Okay. I've tried to discuss Staphylococcus aureus infection because Staphylococcus aureus is a very common microbe. It actually is a commensal. Okay, it lives on our skin. So you can imagine, because it lives on our skin, how does it get transmitted? It gets transmitted by your hands, by the mobile phones, or it can get transmitted from mother to infant, or it can get transmitted by the air, or it can get transmitted if you're picking your nose, because you're literally putting your finger inside your nose, so you're taking the microbe inside your body yourself. Now, generally Staphylococcus aureus, we do not get symptomatic. Okay, only only when we have low immunity will we get infected and it will show symptoms. So what are the problems it can do? It can affect our heart. Okay, or it can cause a systemic infection of the whole body, that is called as septicemia. Or it can cause a local infection at the catheter site, because it is a commensal of the skin. If it becomes active, it can cause infection at the catheter site. In orthopedic surgery, it causes infection. It is sometimes said to cause pneumonia like condition also. And it generally causes furunculosis. Furunculosis is like a localized skin infection. Okay, and because, as I said, immunocompromised, immunosuppressed condition, it becomes symptomatic, so it causes problems in a diabetic foot. On this diabetic patients, the foot can show Staphylococcus aureus infections. Coming to an example of fungi, Candida albicans. What can Candida albicans do? It can cause oropharyngeal candidiasis. It can cause candidiasis which is transmitted throughout the body by blood. It can also affect your abdomen. It can cause vulvovaginal candidiasis. Vulvovaginal candidiasis is sometimes very commonly seen because of a decreased in the immunity because of stress like conditions. Gastrointestinal candidiasis can happen, or a denture stomatitis. In your teeth you can have a candida infection. Generally we know that candida only happens when you have an immunosuppressed condition. Okay, Coming to the next example, this is a Plasmodium infection, protozoa. I've just put it to show how a mosquito bite is transmitting all those sporocytes, all those viruses, all those plasmodiums into our body, which goes to the liver. In the liver, they get matured and get converted into the merocytes. These merocytes go into our red blood cells, where they even form their babies. They get converted into trophocytes, into schizons, and they start circulating into the blood, and they start showing signs and symptoms of malaria. Now when these infected RBCs are again taken by the mosquito, then when the mosquito goes and bites some other person, it will spread to the other person also. That is how malaria spreads. Okay, and what is the blood picture that you see? Can you see a ring over here, a ring like thing over here? That is the ring. Here also in this RBC, that's a ring, and this is the schizon. You see this schizon, that is what is shown over here, and this ring like condition over here, that is what is showing over here. That is how you diagnose the Plasmodium infection. Okay, so how does the patient come to you? With chills and fever, and you take a blood test, and this is what you will see, and accordingly you give antimalarials for treatment, and it generally gets cured. Okay, influenza virus, I included influenza virus because it is a very common, and it's a very common virus, and we should know about its structure. So what are the two things on its surface? One of them is hemagglutinin H, and other is neuraminidase N. So hemagglutinin is how much it can affect the RBC, and neuraminidase is how much it can affect the neurons. Depending on its H and N architecture, it will affect our RBCs or our neurons. Okay, and you know, one of the example, classic H1N1 swine flu, very common, and it was in a lot of news and stuff. So this is how the H1N1 name has come into practice. And this, the core protein is RNA. You can see over here, the RNA is forming the core protein. This is the lipid envelope, and this is the protein envelope. So this is just the cell wall layer. Okay, M1 and M2 are just the part of the cells. That's okay. They are not important. All I want to say is influenza is an RNA virus. Okay, how it is transmitted? By the respiratory tract, by droplets. It's an RNA virus. It often mutates. How does it mutate? So there are changes, antigenic changes. Which antigenic changes? This H and N. Okay, they both change. So that's why we need to keep on developing new vaccines against the influenza. And who keeps a check on that? WHO. What are the signs and symptoms the patient will come with? Fever, chills, malaise, headache, sore throat, dry cough, all those. It is generally a self-limiting disease. Sometimes fatigue lasts for some time, and the treatment that you give is generally supportive. Okay, and if needed, symptom management. Flu is vaccine is given so that any further attacks do not happen. Next virus we are discussing is HIV virus. HIV virus structure, you can see over here, this is glycoprotein 120 and this is GP41. Why we need to know these two? Because there are drugs which are acting against them. Okay, again it also contains an RNA virus in the center, and you can see it has integrase, it has reverse transcriptase, it has all those things which are normally present in a human cell nucleus. Okay, its structure is lipid bilayer, it has a nucleocapsid P24 protein layer, it has a P17 on its layer, it has protease enzymes, it has integrase enzymes, all these which can break up the nucleus of the human cell and go inside the human cell. Why am I talking like this? Because that is what HIV does. You can see over here the HIV virus came, bind to the cell wall. It has fused because it has all those integrins and lysosomes, and it releases its RNA inside. The RNA, with the help of the reverse transcriptase, will go here and it will attach itself to the DNA, the normal DNA of our human beings, okay, which is present in the nucleus. It will go and attach itself to the DNA. After that, the infected RNA gets formed, and the infected RNA starts coming out and starts getting replicated and starts forming more cells. That is how a person gets infected by HIV. Okay, this is just a cytokine receptor that is helping in attaching the RNA into the DNA of the cell. Okay, coming to the next part of the lecture is about the stress. So what is a stress? Stress is actually a state of total disharmony. It is a threat to our homeostasis, to our normal balance, mental balance. Toleration is dependent on the personal coping skills. So stress, everybody responds and works out their stress in different ways. So this is what is toleration. How much a person can tolerate the stress. Now, what is the physiological stress? It can be chemical, it can be physical. Chemical by release of certain chemicals, or physical, like you are listening to some noise, or there is like a sudden decrease in the oxygen, or like you have a sudden pain because of an injury, that will cause you physical stress. Stresses can be psychological or environmental. What are the things which can cause like which can cause us stress? They can be either psychological, like something happening in our life, any anxiety or any depressive condition, or they can be environmental. Environmental how? Like any disease happening to us, or any drug causing us any problem, or any surgery, that can also cause you environmental stress. Okay, what does our body generally do? It generally adapts. Either it changes itself to the stress. That is how the body adapts. Okay, normally that is it is a very normal process. The adaptation by the body is a very normal process. It is to protect the body, and it is developmental, but it can be all encompassing. Like sometimes the adaptation can be even bad for us, and it may cause us even more stress. Okay, the ability of the same stressor to produce different responses reflect adaptive capacity of the person. So one stress, like if an exam, you have been given exam since long, so but if the different exams can give you different levels of stress, right? So that is what we are trying to say in this statement. So the same stressor, the exam stress, it can produce different responses up depending how you adapt yourself. So when we talked about the midterm, initially when we talked about the midterm, like giving the midterm when at its scheduled time, that was a huge stressor for us. So now that we have got some time with us, we have got time to prepare, we have the content, so now you will hopefully respond to the midterm stress in a less aggressive way. Okay, mild, brief, and controllable stress may be positive stimuli to both intellectual growth and development. It is now again, this is like a two-way statement. Okay, not only is stress is bad, yes, it is bad, but sometimes it is also good, because it is helping in the development of our body. Because whenever you have a stressful situation, your brain will start thinking, how are you going to work against it? How are you going to find your way out of the problem, right? So it is also sometimes good. It helps in development of the part of our brain. Severe uncontrollable stress can be bad. Okay, like if you have a stress which is very severe and keeps on increasing and piling, then it is really bad to the health. Now coming to the stages, so there is a general adaptation syndrome, so which helps us in adapting against a stress. So what are the stages of that syndrome? First one is an alarm. So our body, first of all, it goes into an alarm phase. Oh, something is causing us stress. So that is a CNS alarm. What will happen? That body defenses will start acting. Oh, what can we do? It is like a fight or a flight situation. Do you want to fight? Do you want to flight? Or do you want to face the anger? Or do you want to run away? What do you want to do? There will be increased secretions of the glucocorticoids and their effects. There will be increased activity of the sympathetic nervous system. There will be an increased release of adrenaline. So everything, that's an alarm stage. Everything starts getting alarm. Stage 2 is resistance. So what happens is, now that you know, okay, this is what you want to do, so glucocorticoid secretions will come back to normal. Okay, the sympathetic nervous system will come back to the normal. then norepinephrine levels will return to the normal, and the anxiety, the fight and flight situation which was going on in your mind, it will all come back to the normal. Why? Because you have developed a kind of resistance. Okay. Stage 3 is exhaustion. When does stage 3 happen? When you took the decision, right? Like first alarm stage, you took the decision that you wanted to fight, you fight against it, and then you had the resistance phase, that okay, settled. But sometimes even after fighting, the stressor does not go, it keeps on staying over there. So there will be an increased glucocorticoids which is even higher than the rate needed, and there will be a low resistance. Okay, so when you are supposed to settle down, you will not settle down. The adrenaline will keep on pumping, the glucocorticoids will keep on working, so then your body will be exhausted and it enters into the phase that is called as exhaustion. Stress involves the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. Okay, it is an all involving system. The stress response is initiated whenever stressor is in the body or it is perceived that oh, stressful situation is going to come. So this was the very complicated diagram of the book. I have tried to simplify it. So what happens, what do I mean by the neuroendocrine response? First of all, we know if whenever there is a stress, the sympathetic nervous system gets stimulated. So fight or flight, right? The sympathetic nervous system will in turn stimulate your adrenal medullas, okay, which will release the catecholamines that are adrenaline, noradrenaline, also called as epinephrine, norepinephrine, right? Which will in turn stimulate your pituitary gland because it's the thinking gland, which will in turn release the ACTH, adrenocorticotrophin hormone, which will in turn stimulate the adrenal cortex, the outer layer of the adrenal gland. Like remember, think sugar, salt, sex. That is how we remember it, right? Sugar, glucocorticoids, salt, mineralocorticoids, and sex. All those hormones, estrogen, progesterone. That okay. So think sugar, salt, adrenal cortex gets activated. Why? Because as glucocorticoids, all those mineral corticoids, aldosterone, cortisol, everything starts releasing. So when glucocorticoids start releasing, the glucose starts getting metabolized, so you start getting your energy. When you have aldosterone releasing, so your blood pressure starts coming into control, that okay, please don't shoot up, you have to stay in control. So that is how your system works. Okay, what is the function of catecholamines? Cortisol promotes glucose release and other sources of fuel. Epinephrine, what does epinephrine mainly do in the neuroendocrine response? The adrenaline, it will increase the blood flow to the main organs, heart, brain, and skeletal muscle. Heart, so that the heart keeps on pumping, brain, so that it keeps on thinking, and skeletal muscle, so that you can run or fight, whatever you need to do, right? What else it will do? It will dilate the airways. So what happens, as soon as it dilates the airways, more oxygen comes into the body. More oxygen, more energy can be produced, more nutrients can be obtained, right? So that is the main function of epinephrine. What does norepinephrine do? So norepinephrine has always worked complementary to the epinephrine. It is kind of like a friend of epinephrine. So what does norepinephrine do? It will constrict the blood vessels of the viscera. So what will it do? All the other non-important organs, you don't really need blood supply to the stomach and to the kidneys at that time. So the blood supply from all those places will start getting restricted. It will increase the mental alertness so that we are more alert. What is the effect of cortisol on the metabolic process? It mobilizes the glucose, amino acids, lipids to the bloodstream so that you can start using it. The unnecessary metabolic processes are inhibited. And what else? It will suppress the immune and inflammatory response. So it suppresses the immune and inflammatory response. The immune system of our body and inflammatory response, it should not come. Why? Because when you are trying to run away from the situation, you don't want your immunity to say no, you don't want to run, and start giving you coughing and sneezing and all those kind of problems, right? Because you want to run. And inflammatory response also should not come, because it will hinder. When you want to take a rapid action, it will not let you take the rapid action. There is a very well understood link between all these nervous, endocrine, and immune systems. they communicate through those common signal molecules. Remember all those chemical molecules, your chemokines and all that? Not going into those details, don't worry, but that is how they communicate. This regulates cellular behavior of each system during the challenges associated with the stress. Because of all these chemicals and because of all these systems working in coordination with each other, you get a very nice response. That's why whenever you see any problem and you want to run away, that's your flight, that's your sympathetic nervous system helping you do it, and it can work properly because it's all working in coordination. Okay, that's all for your infection and the stress lectures. If you have any doubts, you can ask me by email. Thank you.